In this video, we are going to see how we can create visuals synchronized with our music in Ableton Live using Max MSP, so Max for Live. Hey everyone, and welcome to a new video. So this is a video for all our Ableton Live users, friends, which would like to get into Max MSP or are already into Max MSP maybe, and would like to create visuals with Max to go with their music. For example, when you do a live set, there is a projector in the club and you want to have some visuals going with your music, but you don't know exactly how to do that. There are some applications that do this sort of thing, but none of them gives you the absolute freedom and power of creation that Max inside Live gives you. Now, Max has sort of a steep learning curve, someone will say, but with this video, and actually with my channel in general, we are trying to make this curve much less steep. So without any further ado, let's jump into the tutorial. So first thing first, I got Ableton Live here, latest version. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to load the demo song because I need some music to work with. And I'm not a musician, so we're going to use the demo song that comes with Ableton. Now, to find this demo song, you actually have to go into your application folder. And on Windows, it's in another place, which I'm not sure of. But if you Google where to find demo song of Ableton Live, you're going to find it. So in Mac, we have to right-click on the application of Ableton, show package contents, and then we go into app resources, and I guess we go into core library, lessons, and demo songs. And let me check, there is one that has the whole Live Suite demo. You can open whatever, it doesn't matter if you have the light version of Live or if you have the Suite version, it's actually the same. So I'm going to open the Suite version. And there we go, this is the demo song, let's give it here. I'm not sure you're actually hearing it, but you can just check it yourself. So what I'm going to do now is to create a new Max for Live device. So a Max for Live device, it's basically Max, this program that we were talking about inside Live. So built in the Live application, we have the possibility to use and open Max and create devices. So that's what I'm going to do. First thing, I want to create a MIDI track. So I'm going to insert a MIDI track. I will just put it at the top of my set, live set. And I'm going to rename it visuals track, something like that. Cool. Then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to click here on Max for Live, and I'm going to create a Max MIDI effect. And I drop it inside this track. So now we got a Max MIDI effect. Now, if you have a version of Max, which I think should come with the Live, otherwise you can get even just a monthly abonnement to Max. But in any case, I will just take for granted that you have a copy of Max working. So what we can do now to edit this Max for Live effect and start building our program, our patch, it's called in Max to create the visuals. What we want to do is to click on this icon, which is the edit button. And what it will do is that it will open Max and it will open this as a patch, as a Max patch. So a Max for Live device in edit mode, basically. I want to zoom in. I would like to be able to zoom in. For some reason, I can zoom out with my keyboard, but not zoom in. So I guess I'm going to do this manually. Cool. Let me actually start to play the music. And I will just make the master a bit lower amplitude. So I'm not really a Live user. So I don't really know my way around Live so well, but actually for what we're doing today, you just need the basis of Live. We're not really messing up too much with Live, we are just working with Max inside Live. So the first type of visuals we're going to create is going to be some simple, just showing some videos. So imagine like a live VJ set where you have just some videos continuously changing from one video to the other, and there are some effects. So we're going to go for this type of stuff. So let's start creating our patch. And the first object we're going to create, because in Max we talk about objects, is a JIT world object. And a JIT world will create this black window that appears somewhere on our screen. To create a new object, first we need to unlock the patch. It's called this action, which you can do with Command +E it unlocked the patches. So it means now we are in edit mode, right? Or let me actually save this device. I'll save it on my desktop as Mask for Live Visuals tutorial. Cool. And so I was saying with Command E we can unlock the patch, which means we are now in edit mode and we can create objects. So if I click N on the empty patch, on somewhere on the patch, it will create an empty object. So I just need to write inside the name of the object I want to create, which in this case is JIT World. So Jitter is the library in Max which allows us to work with visuals. So that's why all these objects, most of the objects we're going to work with in this video have this JIT prefix. So let's write that down, n equal create new object. And this, of course, only when we are in edit mode, because if we are not in edit mode, we are kind of in performance mode, and I press Command E to lock the patch, I cannot create new objects, right? If I press N, nothing happens. So that's how it works to create new objects. Now, objects have attributes in Max, which means especially jitter objects. Which means this is like options that we can pass to these objects. So don't worry too much about remembering those attributes for the moment, those options that we are passing to the objects, because I have a ton of tutorials on this stuff. So whatever you don't understand or you think you are forgetting, or whatever you don't remember, you can just get a more in-depth look about how jitter works in Max in a lot of other videos. So just watch this video, just get a general sense for how this stuff works, and then you can go in depth in all my other tutorials. So the first attribute we want to give to the JIT world, it's floating, and I'm going to set this to 1. So this is like saying set this parameter which is called floating to 1. And what this does is that it will prevent this window from sleeping behind the patch, because if we will set this to 0, then when we click on the patch, the window will actually disappear behind the patch. So that's not what we want. We want to set it to floating 1, which means the window is always going to be on top of the patch. Cool. And then we want to enable this world, which basically means it's going to render our visuals. So imagine this as kind of the main node where all the visuals are rendered to. Okay, without this object we cannot render anything and we don't have any visuals. So we want to have it enabled by default. Because if we don't enable it by default, we can always enable it by sending it the number 1 or 0. So for example, we can create a toggle. This object is called toggle, which we can create with T, always with the patch in edit mode. And what this toggle does, if we connect it to JIT world, because in Max, the cool thing about Max is that we connect objects together to make them do something. So it's like node-based, the graphical node-based programming environment. So if we make this on, it will send a 1 to JIT world, and if we make this off, it will send it at 0, which means on and off. So that's another way to enable or disable the JIT world object. In fact, if we create a message box and connect it to the toggle, we can see that it's outputting 1 and 0. So that's another new thing I just showed you. This is a message box, which we can create with M. So a message box is not really an object that does stuff. I mean, it does a lot of stuff, but it's more like a container for data. So imagine it as a container for text, basically, text and numbers. And we can create that with M. If we connect anything to the right inlet of a message box, because you can see it has 2 inputs, one is red and the other is blue. If we connect to the inlet of the right inlet of the message box, we're going to visualize whatever is coming inside. So that's a pretty cool property of message boxes. So that was it for the moment with the attributes for the JIT world. Now what we want to do is to start to get some video inside our patcher, inside live. So we can do that by creating the JIT movie object, and we have to give it an attribute, so an option, which is output underscore texture, and we have to give it the number 1, which means on. And also what I would like to give it is the attribute volume set to 0, and volume we could set it to 1 or 0, which means basically output the volume of the movie that you're playing. We don't want any volume because we have our music going on. So we'll just set the volume of the movie to 0, so vol 0. So output texture, actually means that we want to output a texture from this JIT movie, because otherwise it's going to output a matrix. So just to get you kind of familiar with this concept, there is this thing in Max of matrix versus textures. And the matrix uses the CPU of our computer, while the texture uses the GPU. And if you are in any way familiar with computer graphics, you know that you always want to go with the GPU, because that's more performance processing unit to work with graphics. So we always want to use the GPU when playing videos inside Max. So inside Max for Live, so that's why we say output texture 1. This should be actually kind of, just think by default that this is how we need to play videos, with this output texture set to 1. Cool, so we now need to load a video inside this movie. And you know what, we can either just grab a video and drop it inside the JIT movie object, and now we can connect it to the JIT world. And there we go. There is a video displayed on my window. That's the video I just dragged and dropped inside the JIT movie object. Otherwise, we can also use an object called drop file. So this object, I created like all the other objects, but it's not created by a simple shortcut. I actually need to write its whole name, which is drop file, right? And this object, what it will do is that it will give us the path of whatever we drop inside it. So if I just drop a movie inside it, it will give me the full path of this file inside my computer. And that's cool, because then I can just say, prepend read. And read is a command for the JIT movie. In fact, if you right click on the input of JIT movie, and you go into messages, which is like the commands for this object. So we have the attributes, which is what we were talking about, all the options for this object. And then there are the messages, which are the command for this object. And you can see that there is a read command, which basically means read a movie. And it needs a path to check where this movie is. So we can just pass it the path of whatever movie, and it's going to read it. So let's give it a try. Okay. And it seems to work. Now, if stuff doesn't work, you always want to check the Max console. So you can see this icon here on the right, where there is this this right circle. This is the Max console. It basically it's the way Max has to communicate with us. It will tell us if there are some errors, or it will tell us if something didn't work. Like, for example, before I created this draw object, which doesn't exist because I wanted to create a drop file, but then I just got bored and didn't type it anymore. And so it just, in this case, Max will tell me there is no such object. There is not the draw object. So this is the way Max has to communicate with us. So if stuff is not working, always check the Max console, see which error you get. And once you get a bit more familiar with Max, you'll be able to kind of interpret those errors and know what's not working inside your patch. Now, we got our drop file, we got our movie playing. Let's start to have some fun. So let's add some effect to our video. Now, there is a very convenient way in Max when you're just starting to get some ready-made effects, which is the Vidsy package. So a package is like a bunch of objects. And in Max, we have these Vidsy and Beep packages that are already integrated inside the UI. So if we click on Vidsy, you can see that there is this menu with a bunch of different type of effect that we can have. And we want to go into the effect menu. So these are all effects that we can apply to video. This is all about video. For example, I want to go actually into the transform section, and this is what will transform the video, which we can think about it as an effect, but transforming is more about like dealing with the actual size of the video, kind of duplicating, zooming in, zooming out, rotating, all this kind of stuff. And in fact, I want to go with the zoomer effect. So what do? It's just a drag and drop it inside the patch. And there it is. The patch must be unlocked for this to work. And if we connect then the output of the zoomer to the JIT world and the input of the zoomer to our movie input, we can start to see how this works. Basically, it's going to zoom in and out. And it has also this toggle here, which is high or low, which means we can have a lower level of zoom or a higher level of zoom. And of course, we want to have a higher level of zoom. So we will set this to high. And then we are ready to have some fun. So basically what I want to do now is to link this zoom factor to some MIDI input from Ableton. I'm going to create a new MIDI clip inside the track. And I'm actually going to loop only that part. And then I'm going to go with just inputting some MIDI notes. Like one every quarter or something. Or maybe like just where the bass is. So now going back into my device, and if we check the MIDI input, what's coming in with a message box, always by connecting it to the right inlet, we can see that it's sending us some stuff. So if we use an object which is called Midi Parse, we can parse kind of the MIDI input into different components. For example, the pitch and velocity from the first outlet here. And that's actually all what we need. So the pitch is 60 because I'm using the C3. I placed my note at the C3 position, so the number is going to be 60, and then this number is going to be the velocity. And you know that, and you can see that when the note is off, the velocity is going to be 0. So what we want to do is to get those two numbers separately. So I'm going to use an unpack object. And unpack, what it will do is simply to give us, if I give it an I and an I for integer, because those are integer numbers, it's going to give us these two numbers separately and not as a list, because this in Max is called a list. So two numbers that come out from the same outlet, this is a list. And if we unpack them into single integers, then they're just going to be single integers and we can work on them separately. Now this is an integer box which I just created with the I. So if you press I on an unlocked patch, it will create an integer number box. And this is what allows us to visualize integer numbers and to send them manually, so we can lock the patch and click on these objects and use them. So we can delete this list here. Okay, great. So what we want to do now is to say every time a new note comes in, let's zoom in, for example. And we can do that with this object which is called select or cell. It's the same. And we can say select 60. So every time the number 60 comes inside this object now, this object will output a bang. So a bang is actually literally the word bang. And what a bang is in Max is like a trigger. So it means for most object, it means do something, do what you got to do. And for example, there is this object which is called button, which we can create with B, another shortcut. And what this object does is that if we click on it, it will send a bang out. So it will send a word bang out. And if it receives a bang, it will just illuminate itself. Actually, if it receives everything, it will just send out a bang and illuminate itself. So we can see that this is happening every time the bass is kicking in and we have our MIDI note. This is going to send a bang out. Now, the only problem we've got to use this as a trigger is that if we check what's coming out of this object, and we can do that using the print object, which will just print its content to the Max console, another useful use of the Max console, we can see that this will send us two bang, because we get a note on and a note off. And this we don't want. We just want to have a bang when we have a note on, not when we have a note off. So that's an easy way to filter the note off, which is basically we can use a gate object. Now a gate object will send the numbers through if it receives a 1 inside its left inlet, and if it receives a 0, it will not send its numbers through. Actually, a cool feature of Max, and Max for Live then, is that every object has its own help. So that's a cool thing which I could have mentioned earlier, but it's never too late. Basically, a help file, so if we right click on the object, we can go on this menu and say open gate help. Now the help file will show everything that the object does, so it's the way to understand what the object will do. For example, we can use it also as with several outputs in order to send an input that comes in the right inlet to a different outlet. As you can see, now it's coming out from the middle input. If we send it a 1, it will open the first outlet. If we send it a 0, it will just close everything. So in this case, we just have one input. So if we send it out 0, it will close everything. If we send it a 1, it's going to open the right inlet. So we can just check when this number is different than 0 with a different operator. This is like a logical operator. That means whatever comes in, if it's different than 0, then give us a 1, otherwise give us a 0. So what we want to do is to use this 1 in order to open this gate. So the unpack will first send the number to the right, to the different operator, and unlock the gate, and then we'll pass this number, the 60, through. So let's give it a try. Yeah, exactly. Now, as you can see, it's sending out a single bang. And then the unpack will send a 0 to the different operator, which will, is 0 different from 0. Now this is false, so it will send out a 0, which will close the gate, and the 60 that comes again from the unpack object will not pass through because the gate is already closed. Okay, so Max is full of these kind of little logical reasoning stuff. So if you are a person that likes puzzle and likes Lego and likes all these sort of logical things that tickle your brain, then Max is going to be a lot of fun for you because it's full of this stuff. So we have now a bang. And we can use this bang now to do some cool things. For example, I would like to do in a way that every time we get a bang, we zoom to a random amount. So you can see that if we set the number 1 in the zoom, it's going to be the default zoom, and then the higher we go, it's going to be much higher. So we could just go, for example, between 1 and 6, for example, something like that. So let's create a random object and give it the number 6 as an argument. Now, an argument is very similar to an attribute. It's something that we write inside the object. It just doesn't have this at prefix. It's just the actual value that we want to set, and they are always in a certain order. So for example, the random object has 2 arguments. One is the range and one is the seed, and the range is always going to be from 0 to the number that we write inside -1. Okay, so from 0 to the number we write in the object -1. Okay, so in this case it's going to create random numbers between 0 and 5, exactly. So if we use an integer number to visualize which random number is going to create, we can see that are all numbers between 0 and 5. And it creates a number every time it receives a bang from the bang operator. So that's pretty cool. Now what we want to do is to use this value as our zoom. So what we do is that we can simply connect this number to the zoom control. So let's just give it a try. And you can see that it's kind of not working, and that's because VZ object, by default, they accept values that go between 0 and 1 for all their parameters. So if a value is in between 0 and 1, it's going to be automatically rescaled to the minimum and maximum of the parameter, which is kind of not so intuitive. So in order to give it exactly the number that we want to give it to, so without it being rescaled, we want to prepend whatever we are sending it with the exact word. So prepend is the same object that we used before. And what we'll do is we'll prepend whatever we write inside the object to whatever comes in the prepend object. So it's just a nice way to concatenate stuff together. Could be numbers, could be strings, could be symbols like words, could be whatever. So if we send the exact to the zoomer, to whatever bits the object, it's going to set this parameter exactly at that value. So that's what it's doing right now. So that's pretty cool. But actually we wanted to go between 1 and 6, and now at the moment it's going between 0 and 5. So what we want to do is to simply sum 1 to whatever is coming out of here, which is going to be between 0 and 5. If we sum 1, is now going to be between 1 and 6, right? So the range is now between 1 and 6. Nice. Let's see how it works with the music. So you can see actually that every time we have the bus, every time we have this MIDI note coming in, it will give us a different zoom. It's not happening too often, so I will just increase the number of notes. I will just put a bunch of notes around. You could get really kind of precise with these and just do it very nicely, follow the beat in the music. For the moment I'm just going a bit just randomly. And that's nice, but let's for example make it a bit smoother, this passage, because every time this is just giving us a different integer number, is not really smoothing from one value to the other, and there's actually a way to do that. So we can use an object called line and give it two arguments. The first argument is the default value, and the second argument is how many milliseconds should pass between this object outputting a number and the subsequent number. So this object works like this. If we give it a list of numbers, and we can use a message box to do that. So for example, we say start at 0, comma, go to 1 in, for example, 1 second. So we write 0, 1, and then 1000 is how long it should take to go from one number to the other, right? That's pretty cool. If we just don't write the first number, we can just write whatever number it will get to that number in the amount of time that we specify in milliseconds. And again, if you're a bit lost about what the line does, you can always check its help file, which will tell you exactly how this works. So that's a very cool feature of Max. And now I want to do this. I want to say $1 in, I don't know, for example, 300 milliseconds. And $1 in a message box is simply going to be replaced by whatever we input inside the message box. So for example, if I input an integer number, this $1 is going to be replaced by this integer number. If I write something before and after this $1, it's simply going to replace the $1 with this whatever comes in, and it's going to output the whole list with this number instead of the $1. So strong with this knowledge, we can now see that if we connect this our random number to the $1, then we have kind of the numbers nicely smoothing out of the line object. But this is not yet working, and you know why? Because that's an integer number, and what we are getting out of line are floating point numbers, so decimal numbers. And that's of course because if we want to kind of make a smooth transition between two numbers, we're going to have to use decimal numbers. And that's the integer number is preventing those decimal numbers to go through. So we just delete this integer number and we press F to create a floating point number. So floating point number is exactly like the integer number, but it will visualize floating point numbers, so decimal numbers, and we can create it with F. So this is like float number box. And as you can see now, it's smoothly transitioning between one zoom value and the other. Maybe 300 milliseconds is a bit too long a time. Let's make it 50 milliseconds, for example. And then we have this kind of a bit more snappy transition. Let's see how it works with the music. And it seems to work pretty nicely, actually. Okay, I think we're almost done with this. For this first lesson, I just want to show you something else briefly. To make this a little cooler, I want to show you an object which is called GTL Pass. And what this object is going to do is like, you can apply post-processing effects to your visuals using this object. So you can place it everywhere in the patch. It doesn't need to be connected to other objects. And we give it an attribute which is called fxName. So this object is a bunch of effects that we can choose from. And there are ways to check which effects are, which are shown in some other video of mine. So you can check that. You can also check its help file to see which effects are available. But the effect we want now is called Bloom HQ. So Bloom minus HQ, which means high quality. And as you can see, when we apply this effect, everything is getting a bit brighter. So let's actually give it a threshold. It has a threshold attribute to this effect, which we're going to set to 0.9. So this basically means which amount of color should I consider before starting to apply the bloom, which is kind of this glow effect. And we say the amount of color should be like 0.9 for each channel of the colors. The maximum being 1 and the minimum being 0. And you can actually see that the kind of the black band of our, where we don't have any video, because it's kind of the proportions of the video don't cover the whole window, right? So we have this black band, but they're not really black, they're kind of grayish. So we can make them black by setting the attribute erase color for the JIT world, and then we can set it to 0, 0, 0 for red, green, and blue, and 1 for the alpha. So this range goes between 0 and 1 for all the colors, and 1 being the alpha, which is the transparency, which we want to have full opaque. Let me just get a new video just to have a bit different feeling, and I will get this one with the cow, so I just drop it inside this drop file thing. And there we go, there's our video. So what we want to do, for example, could be to set the amount of bloom also relative to this zoom effect. So we could say, again, when there is a bang coming in, let's create some random numbers again. This time we create a number that goes between 0 and 99. We divide it by 99, so it goes now between 0 and 1. And note that I put this dot after the 99, because if I will not put any dot, it will only work with integer numbers, so it will just give us a number between 0 and 1, I guess. Or actually just 0, unless we get exactly 99 as a random number. But if we put this dot, now Max works with integer numbers. So I made a series of tutorial for extremely Max beginners, which explain all this stuff. So I will put a link in the description. You can check all these nuances of Max in that series. And so with that, we can set the bloom amount of GTL Pass. So we can use a message box and use a $1 as we did before. So in this case, this is simply going to output a list with the word bloom underscore amount followed by a number that goes between 0 and 1. And we can connect this to GTL Pass. So every time we have a different bloom amount. Now there's something bothering me, which is actually I would like that every time the line goes to a new number, actually will get back to 1 after some time. So I will add another 2 numbers to this list that goes into line here in order to get it back to a zoom of 1. So the list goes like this, goes to this number, whatever it is, random number, in 50 milliseconds. That whatever number this was, go back to 1 in, I don't know, 100 milliseconds. So let's see how this works. Right. So exactly, it will just zoom in and then go back to 1, which is the default zoom in 100 milliseconds. And that's pretty nice. I want to do the same thing here, so I will create with the bloom value, so I create a new line object. And I will simply let's not use a random number here, let's just simply tell it to go from 0 to, I don't know, to 3 or something in 50 milliseconds and then go back to 0 in, I don't know, 300 milliseconds, something like that. And we can trigger those lists to go into line by simply using this bang, as we were doing before. And right, it's working. Let me make these notes a bit more in line with the music, so like this one doesn't really work. Okay, so I kind of adjusted a bit the MIDI notes to follow the music better. And let's see. Doesn't look bad at all. Let's do one final thing. So we don't really have any parameters for this device. We're going to do this in a sequent video, but what we can do is to add some stuff to our device interface. So for example, I would like to add a message. I would like to add this drop file object to a device interface. So I will just add it to the presentation. And now if you click on this icon here, which is presentation mode, you can see that all the objects disappear. And you can see only the objects that you add to the presentation mode. That's exactly what we want to do. And so I'm going to add also this object to the presentation because, for example, we may want to change the clip mode, which, for example, has then a different effect. We don't really see it because we are zooming only in the positive direction, all right? But we could, for example, change this low and high thing, whatever, just to show you that we can add actually parameters to our interface, but we're going to see this more in depth in the next video. So I saved the device is now saved, and in order to open this device always in presentation mode, we need to click here on this I here on the right of our patch, and then click on this P, which is the patch inspector. And at the end, where there is this view menu, we want to click to open in presentation. So this will by default open this patch in presentation mode. So we flag this toggle. So now I save and I close the device. And now you can see that our device is kind of gone, but if we click on this track, we can see that we have our interface here showing. So what I'm going to do is to just drop again movie inside the drop movie file, and by magic, it's working because the world is always activated, the JIT world, so it's always rendering, and basically by default, it will start to apply this effect that we created inside our Max for Live patch. Cool, I think this is going on by almost an hour already, which is a long time. I'm sure this was overwhelming if you are just starting with Max, but if you were kind of already a Max user and Max for Live user, but never delved into the visual part, I hope you learned some new stuff here. Cool, so I will do some more videos of this if there is the interest, and we will go on with creating audio-reactive visuals in Max for Live, which is actually something that is pretty cool, and it's kind of easy to do, especially with this MIDI interaction that Live and Max for Live offer us, so this great level of integration. Great. Guys, if you like the video, put a like on the video, follow the channel, this will be much appreciated. You can check out my Patreon where I'm going to share this device for a little monthly support. You can download this device and all the patches basically that I ever created. So if you feel like exploring some visual jitter patches, check that out. And thanks a lot for following. I hope to see you in the next video. Until then, have fun. Ciao.